Number 1. The dorm mate. When I first went to college, freshmen were required to live in the triple rooms in the dormitories. So because of this, I had 2 dorm mates. On one side of the room were bunk beds, with a single bed on the other side of the room. This becomes important to know. I met both of my dorm mates the day I moved in. There was Trent, a philosophy major, who was a little weird but relatively normal. He was very studious and also an athlete. For the most part, he would lay on his bed, the top bunk, and do his work. The other dorm mate, the one who took the singular bed, was named Miles. He was a completely different story. Where Trent was friendly, Miles was weird. He rarely would speak to either of us at all. Hell, he wouldn't even tell me what his major was when I asked him. He just ignored the question. This was actually normal for the time that we lived together. I learned very quickly that he didn't want to be friends, and I tried to give him his space as much as possible. He stared, all the time, when I came into the room after class. And if he was there, which he nearly always was, he just stared at me. Sometimes he wouldn't break the stare for quite a while, but when he finally stopped, he tended to not pay much attention to me or Trent again. It was just damn creepy. Still, while it was creepy, and it was annoying in the beginning, I just learned to put up with it. There was one night, when I got back to the room, that neither Trent nor Miles were there. I had known that Trent was at a party, but had no idea what Miles must have been up to. It was pretty late, so I just rejoiced in the fact that I had the room to myself. And then, I could probably get a great night's sleep. I fell asleep quickly, and I slept hard and deep. I did wake up at one point in the night because I thought that I heard something. My immediate instinct was to look over at my digital clock. However, I couldn't find it. I kept staring at where it had been, and wondered if we had a power outage or something. It took a few moments more for my eyes to completely adjust to the light, and I yelled in surprise as I saw a figure standing in front of my desk. It was Miles, standing in the room, looking at me. I didn't know how long Miles had been there, and how long he had been staring, but already knowing how odd he was, I thought it was best not to really ask him anything. I simply told him I was sorry for yelling because he had startled me. He didn't respond, so I turned my back to him and did my best to fall back to sleep. It took a while, however, because even though my back was to him, I know that he didn't move away immediately. I felt him there, looking at me pointlessly through the dark. Eventually, I heard him move to his bed and get in it. Still, I wasn't able to fall back to sleep until I heard him snoring. Miles was really becoming a problem, and I didn't like when he was around. But things got worse one day when Trent announced he had gotten a room in a jock dorm or something. I was going to be left alone with Miles, that weird guy. And I can tell you that it was very frightening. It was the day before Trent was moving that my fear began to grow. I tried to convince myself I was overreacting. Miles was just a weird goth kid or something. Maybe I was being prejudiced. I was sitting alone, doing my homework, when I heard a noise behind me. I jumped and was shocked to see Miles was in the room. He must have come in and somehow was very quiet. I told him hello, and went back to my work. Here's the worst part. I could see his reflection in the window. He stared at me, and was not going to look away. Then, after 2 hours of this crap, I saw him get up. He walked slowly through the small room, and was suddenly right behind me. I was frozen, not really sure what I wanted or could do. I couldn't turn around and look at him. I was very afraid. Miles put his hands on my shoulders, and I jumped again. But that didn't compare to what he did next. Miles slowly lowered his head until his mouth was right on my ear. I was shivering, scared and not sure what he was going to do. I mean, I thought he would kiss me, because he was massaging my shoulders with his hands. I'm not gay, but I didn't really mind a guy touching my shoulders, but this was so weird. Miles whispered into my ear, and I will never forget the words that boy said to me. When Trent is gone, I'm gonna cut your face off. I'm going to put it on and wear it like a mask and go to your house for Thanksgiving dinner. Miles held his mouth there for a moment when I felt the shock of what was going on. I mean, my body felt like a bolt of lightning. However, once it was over and I was still scared, I jumped up, grabbed my wallet, and I quickly got out of the room. I ran right to the campus police and told them what had happened. When they talked to Miles, he of course denied everything. There really wasn't anything they could do except move Miles to a different room. They did that, and for a short time, I had a triple dorm room all to myself. I would see Miles many times for a semester or two, but then I never saw him again. I never want to. Number 2. The car. I had an encounter with someone when I was a teenager that scared the holy living crap out of me. I mean, this was absolutely terrifying. I will try to convey the sheer terror I felt when I had this incident. Well, incident. I guess that is not really the best thing to call it. It was me being stupid. Why is it that even nice people can turn into the biggest jackasses when they get behind the wheel of a car? And this was weird. Route 90 in Illinois goes up into Wisconsin and Madison. When you get far north, around Rockford, the road goes down to 2 lanes. For some reason, around this area, there is a lot of really stupid driving. People like to block other people from passing the semi-trucks, which generally have to stay in the right lane. It really is one of my least favorite places to drive. I'm not trying to absolve myself of acting like a jerk when I drive. I have to make that statement right away. I can definitely do some dumbass things while on the road. This time, I was coming back down from Madison to Illinois. It was a really cold day, but it was also really sunny. I always hated those days because it seemed so weird to me to be so cold, yet so bright. I was still on the Wisconsin side of the border when I came up upon a green sports car with darkly tinted windows. It was at first driving behind a semi-truck in the right lane, and I was also driving in the right lane. There hadn't been any cars for a while, and while I was coming up to the green car following the semi, I moved into the left lane to pass them up. However, right before I could, the green car moved into the left lane as well. At first, it seemed like the car was trying to pass the semi as well. However, when it got to the front of the semi-truck, the driver tapped their brakes. I had to hit mine, and before I knew it, I was behind the semi again, with the green car right at the back of it, blocking my way. At first, I thought it might possibly be some sort of valid reason for hitting the brakes, but that idea sort of faded when the car picked back up, and then right when it got to the front of the semi, it hit the brakes again. For anyone who has ever been caught in this situation before, you know how annoying it is. The trucks had a 55-mile-an-hour speed limit, which is why we always passed them up. And to keep from being able to travel any faster was a real pain. The green sports car carried this on for about an hour, and the entire time I just kept getting angrier and angrier at what was going on. When it had gotten to the point that I felt like almost ramming the car from behind, it hit the brakes hard, nearly causing an accident. Then suddenly, The car quickly took an exit on the right. I was so angry at this point that I did something that I know now and knew then was stupid. I followed the green car. It got off the freeway, stopped at the lights at the end of the off-ramp, turned, and drove to a department store parking lot that wasn't very far from the exit. I pulled up right behind it, ready to confront the jerk for what I had been put through for the past hour. Before I could do anything, though, a young lady got out of the driver's side of the car and walked very swiftly back to my car. The very moment I noticed her holding the tire iron, it was too late for me to do anything about it. She smashed my driver's side window, sending glass flying everywhere, and then she smashed my back driver's side window. While it was scary that she had done this without the slightest provocation and so swiftly, that wasn't the scariest part of what had happened. The woman came back to my door. She didn't say a word. She did not look angry. She did not look anything. And despite her actions, she seemed very, very calm. And looking at her eyes, I saw like nothing there. There was such a vast emptiness of emotion, or even acknowledgement there. I don't think I'd ever been more frightened of a person in my life, because if there is such thing as a soul, I was convinced right then that lady did not have one. I just got in my car and I took off. With 2 broken windows and the cold air killing me as I drove, I took off. I got back to the freeway and drove to my destination without stopping, constantly looking around me to see if that green sports car was following me. I didn't see it again. And the whole incident made little sense to me. I mean, people play stupid driving games all the time to annoy other drivers, when we all know that. And I shouldn't have followed her off the freeway. But her reaction to me doing this, and that look on her face, well, I saw it in my dreams for a very, very long time after that. Number 3. Billy. I went to school with this kid named Billy, who was my best friend as I was growing up. We did a whole lot of things together, most of them harmless really. But there was the occasional, really out there things that he would do. He'd try to burn ants with a magnifying glass, albeit to little success. Or rip the wings off a butterfly and then watch it suffer. But as weird and distasteful as these things might seem to us, they didn't appear too bad back in those days. I'll let you know right away that this is not going to be one of those typical stories about a boy torturing insects that moves on to animals and then finally to people. It wasn't really like that. I mentioned the insects simply because a lot of young boys do that, and they don't end up being crazy. If Billy had ever killed anything more than insects, then he did it in a way that I never found out what was going on. No, what happened with Billy was unexpected to me when it happened. Billy and I, like I mentioned, grew up together. We hung out and did nearly everything from our preschool days up through the majority of our high school days. We had frequent sleepovers, some that were planned and some that were not. We took walks, played tag, went to movies, you name it. So when did things go bad for the two of us? Well, it was when we were 16 years old. We were in Billy's bedroom playing video games late into the night. As was usual when we did this, he would start dozing at one point and then fall asleep. After that, I just played by myself because there was no waking Billy up after he was asleep. I sometimes thought that he could sleep through a war if one was going on out there. While I was playing, I was leaning back up against Billy's bed. He had been sleeping for about an hour. I was 16, feeling a bit riled up, and thought I'd check under Billy's mattress to see if there were any magazines that I might want to look at. This was a bit before the internet was a common thing. I didn't fear Billy waking up, because I could have stripped him naked and put him out in the snow, and he would never have woken up. When I looked, there were no magazines. but there was a spiral notebook under his mattress. I decided to see what was up with it. Grabbing it and flipping through it, it seemed like some kind of badly organized journal. It seemed like Billy was writing his thoughts down in no particular order, and for no particular reason. Right away, I knew I should have just put the journal back, but I didn't. Hey, I was 16 and very curious, so I decided to read it and see what was going on in my best friend's mind. Most of the stuff was truly boring, but as I flipped through, noticing him writing in circular patterns and things like that, it began to get odd. Billy wrote a lot about his feelings, or more correctly, he wrote about his absence of feelings. He talked about how he stopped feeling emotions towards his family and friends, and just settled into general apathy toward them. He had mentioned sometimes getting into fights with other kids, just to see if he could be angry at them. But no, nothing worked. As I read on and on, I really began to feel for my friend. He never wrote about hurting other people other than the fights. This story is not going to end with 4 pages worth of him describing how he was going to kill me, so don't worry. But it did paint a picture of a kid who seemingly has lost his emotions and his ability to empathize and feel with others. Billy was just a guy going through life wondering why it was hard for him to care or feel anything. I ended up putting the journal away. I tried to put it out of my mind for the most part, and when Billy and I would hang out together afterward, I did notice myself paying particular attention to his expression of emotion. I did, after a while, begin noticing him wearing bandages occasionally. When I would ask him why, he would generally brush it off. I did begin to think that maybe he was cutting himself, maybe as a way to get himself to feel. When we were 17, we were once again in his bedroom playing video games. However, contrary to the last time, I was the one who ended up falling asleep first. I wasn't sure what woke me up at first, as I suppose most people feel when they wake up, but it only took me a second to see the scariest side of my life. Billy was in front of me, taking a razor blade and completely shredding his arm with it, cut after cut after cut. His arm was already cut up pretty bad, so I had no idea how long he had been doing it. There was blood all over him, all over the blade and all over the floor. It was the sickest thing I'd ever seen in my entire life. After a moment of just sheer shock, I felt I had to get over to him and grab the blade from him. When I grabbed his arm, he immediately cut me with the razor blade, and I fell back in surprise. I totally expected Billy to start shredding me up like he had done to himself, but he didn't. He just simply asked me if I could feel it. I told him yes, and the look on his face was just terrifying and empty. He closed his eyes, and I ran out the door to wake his parents up. Billy had lost a lot of blood, but fortunately for him, his mom was able to compress the wound decently until the ambulance got there. I went along because I was cut up as well. The whole experience was sort of haunting in a way. Billy was in the hospital for a while, and then he was placed in a psychiatric ward, and he was in there for even longer. Visiting him when he was in the psych ward seemed nearly impossible. His parents, and often his doctor, didn't think it was the best idea. A ton of time passed, and at one point, without even telling me, his parents packed up the house and moved. Every now and then, I try to find out what happened to Billy. I try to see if he's still alive, if he's in the hospital, or if he's in jail for killing someone, or who knows what. I haven't been able to locate a single thing about him. Hey y'all, Killer Orange Cat here. I've noticed it's been a while since I've gotten some stories out, although I've been sitting on these ones for a bit. I am making no judgment upon the mental health status of any of the people in these stories, but the 3 people who told me these stories, all of whom I have decided to keep anonymous, truly believe these encounters were with psychopaths. And for that reason, I decided to go ahead and keep their designation that way. I hope you all have been enjoying the horror cliché theaters lately. As I mentioned before, they're just a little fun thing I like to do, and they won't be taking place of the true scary stories, so don't worry about that. And if you like this video, please let me know by hitting the like button. Comment on and share the video if you know someone might enjoy it. If you're not subscribed and would like to be, please use the subscribe button and the bell below, or click on the icon of Ichigo the cat that will appear at the end. You can also follow Ichigo and myself on Facebook and Twitter using the links in the description. And please, whatever you do, don't forget to make sure to check in your closet and check under your bed, because you never know where a killer orange cat might be hiding. Good night.